Right, kia ora boys and girls, I'm back again, and now to the difficult bit, allocative efficiency and public goods. So what I want to talk to you about now and talk you through is understanding like what is the allocatively efficient level of use for a public good, and kind of like why the idea user pays is not allocatively efficient. And then we'll look at that exception to what I'm saying when actually through overuse, if too many people use the public good, it can actually become allocatively inefficient, and it actually requires the government to further step in, not just provide it, but actually maybe do some policies like charging for it, or like putting like a quota, like a limit on how many people. Anyway, we'll get to that, but let's just stick with what is allocative efficiency for today. So just have a close look at this model in front of you. There isn't a lot of public goods out there, and you may or may not find this model out there. It is in your textbook. And so what we've got here is the marginal benefit, marginal cost, so basically the cost and benefit from usage and production. And you've got here the blue line, which is MB. Okay, so this is the marginal benefit, and it's saying for like every single user. It says quantity down here, but I actually in the last example I'm going to usage. So usage of this resource could be the walking track, could be national park, could be national defence, that kind of thing. That each person derives a use from it, and that use, that benefit rather, diminishes as more of it's consumed. So diminishing marginal utility, basic idea. And what we're showing here is that this good can be consumed up to zero. So like if it's free of charge, no one charging you for it, then people use it all the way down to zero, okay, because this is zero. Yeah, it doesn't say zero, but it's zero, right? It could be obvious, I hope. All right, and why is the QS there? I don't know why QS is there. I think that's just something that's copied over. Can we just ignore that, please? Okay, let's just ignore the QS. All right, so MB, people use this good up to zero because it's free. And so like everyone who can will use it, and that's like the maximum usage. If everyone who wanted to use the good can, then it will be consumed up to MB equals zero. And then the green line is saying this is the capacity of the resource. So it's always, the way it's pictured here is that the capacity of this good is greater than the usage. All right, so let's think about that one for a second. The capacity of the resource, the national park, for example, is greater than the number of users, the amount of people that could use it and enjoy it. And so it's got here MC equals 0, sorry. And this is the idea that, yes, totally, if you think about it, it would cost quite a lot to like actually make like a national park or like a walk. It doesn't cost like that much actually, but like it does cost money to lay out walking tracks and like, you know, to put up signs and like put in like gravel and stuff and fences and stuff like that. So there is a cost, and you know, toilets and stuff like that as well. There is a cost, but once it's provided, pretty much the additional cost of like providing that resource is zero. And that is a little bit debatable in the real world, but theoretically with public goods, once you provide them, there is no ongoing cost to providing them. And there is some example like with national parks, like, well, once it's done, it is zero for like a really long time. You just leave it and people can go in there and it's fine. So what we're saying is that with allocative efficiency, it's allocatively efficient when marginal benefit, see the blue line, equals zero, which also equals MC. So MB equals MC. So if I just flick back, okay, MSC equals MSB. So in this case here for public good, since MC equals zero, then equilibrium, social equilibrium, oh, that's why QS is there. Now I know, I remember. Okay, like so QS is here because that's where MB equals zero. And that's where allocative efficiency is achieved in a provision of this public good. Okay, so take a moment to think about that. All right, you might want to just pause and kind of like look at the diagram a bit. You ultimately would need to explain that. So you might want to think about it again, rewind, and then try and put it into your own words. If we continue on, what would happen, like, so just to prove that this is allocatively efficient, what happens if we put a price on it, like a toll on a road or something like that, or God forbid, like you had a walking track or something and someone like was at the start and like, you want to go further, you've got to pay $10. Could happen. All right, so what we're showing is MB. I feel like that should be back here, but it's here anyway. So MB is downward sloping, same deal, use it up to zero, and allocative efficiency, we say, is where MB equals zero, so here. So this would be like QS right here. And you can kind of read the diagram as I'm going. and that's the capacity of the park. So what it's saying by this orange triangle here, and yes, the death weight loss is pretty much like always a triangle, like always. The idea is that this is the loss like benefit that is achieved, like this is the benefit that is lost to users if a charge is imposed on it, and this is the benefit that's lost to, say, society. The benefit of people enjoying this park is lost if you put a charge in it, because if you put a charge in it, it restricts it to here. I feel like we should have some labels here. In fact, maybe I'll go back and add them. QS here, and let's call this Q1. Now just imagine, you can draw your own model and you can put it in there. So here's QS, full usage, MB equals MC, allocative efficiency. But then as soon as you put a charge on it, you're going to discourage people from using it. You're going to get less usage. And so we say that there is like lost welfare, they're saying, or like lost benefit to society, because you're now charging for it and less people will use it, and it won't be used to its maximum. So you'd be going from QS to Q1, and therefore you'd have a dead weight loss. And I like to put like letters and things on it, so you could probably go like A, B, C, or QS, Q1, A, a dead weight loss of A, QS, Q1. Just imagine that the labels are there. I know they're not. All right, so that's the idea of why that, go back. No, it's not moving. I don't understand why. Oh, yeah, let's try this. No. Okay, that's awkward. Why the previous, no. Yeah, so why this is allocatively efficient, and then why putting a price on it is not. And it might be a really good way for you to discuss allocative efficiency with a public good after you explain why it's a public good and then why the government has to provide it. Why having no user pays is allocatively efficient, and why putting user pays is not allocatively efficient. So just something to think about though before we get to too many people using it, and this kind of comes into this idea of overuse. Tragedy of commons was something, actually was like asking scholarship, I think about 2 or 3 years ago, and they were looking at like climate change and the idea that the environment and the air, like people, we all use it, it's a public good. They did use air in the example at the start. So like air as a public good, it's like non-excludable and it's non-rival. But then there's this whole thing like with tragedy of the commons, it is becoming rival, that with like people not like, no one owns it, there's no like incentive to look after it. And like, so with the commons, I love this picture of sheep. I did want to find one of cows, but I couldn't. That everyone's using it, but we don't use it too much. You can see still grass here, still plenty of room for them to roam. But then like if you have extra sheep put on it and there starts to be less space for each one, then it's not as good anymore. They use the word degraded, so there'd be like less pasture for the cow. What are they? Sheep to feed on. Okay, and so this is where it's getting beyond capacity. And then the last example is it's too much on there. You can see the grass has gone a bit yellowy, browny, not sort of yellowy really. So that means that this is no good anymore. It's not as good, and therefore this resource has become overused, and it's called the tragedy of the commons, because of the idea that because no one owns it, that overuse will tend to ruin it. Okay, but however, just to throw in a plug, there was this woman called Eleanor Austin who won the, or something like that, the Nobel Peace Prize for Economics, where she proved that in communities like, often like traditional communities, like tribal communities, where they've got like customs and things, and they kind of have like informal rules about land use and stuff like that, they actually can work together to avoid this tragedy of the commons, kind of through like cultural norms and like customs, like where you would like upset your status in society if you were seen to overuse a common resource. Definitely worth looking at. I understand it's probably not something you're interested in right now, but I'm just putting a plug. It's called Eleanor Austin or something like that. Google it. All right, so the last thing we're going to look at for today, and this is before we start looking at policies, is right, big idea. You're kind of like, why is this market failure? So you're like, it's market failure because the private market won't provide these things, so therefore the government does. And you can talk about how like the government provides it, but then like people use it and don't pay, so you've got like free riders. Then you can like talk about or you can talk about what examples are and what characteristics it has. And then you can talk about like what the allocatively efficient level of use is, all right, and what the allocatively like efficient provision level is and all that, and like why it's not allocatively efficient to charge a price. But what we want to end with, and it kind of sets us up for our policies, because it's kind of like policies to manage public goods and like further government intervention is like, at what point is there too many people? And I can say this because I've done a lot of tramping, and I've done like the Able Tasman, I've done like the Kepler track, just depending on what time of year you go and stuff like that. I've also been on the Stairway to Heaven, and the thing is that if there's too many people on the track, you don't really enjoy it as much. I mean, it kind of is cool. You kind of bump into people and you say hello, but then it's kind of like you're like waiting. I remember being on the Tongariro crossing, and there's like the end bit when you're like walking down past the lakes and stuff, and it's like this windy track, and it's just like this stream of people, and you like actually at times have to like wait for like the people in front of you to move. And I think I told you about that person that was like smoking in front of me, like, well, what are you doing? They're so rude. But this is the point where it's becoming congested. You don't really enjoy it as much. It's not as such a like pleasurable experience. Imagine like you're trying to take photos of like beautiful scenic spots, but you've got like 100 people that I will crowd. I'm not joking. Like actually on the Tongariro crossing, this is totally true. You have like a whole crowd of people, and you're like waiting. Could you just like move? I want to take a photo, but you can't. And then like people are taking like selfies and stuff. And you can't get like a clear shot without people in it. So trust me, take it from me. A lot of our walking tracks, and even just national parks, there's like Roy's Peak and Wanaka, you might want to Google that, or the tree. These things are public goods, but they are becoming rival because there's just too many people using it, and therefore each individual user is having like less benefit from enjoying it. And so I've kind of shown this here. This is our original MB, use it up to like 0, and that's where it equals MC, so it's allocatively efficient. But what we're seeing now is like a huge influx of tourists. The tourist numbers in New Zealand has increased massively. And so you can show that by MB increasing to MB1, right? And that's basically just more people using the public good. And really link that to increased tourism numbers. You'll see some of the resources I found for you talk about this. And so what happens when MB increases, I did quite like a big shift here, is that MB can actually increase so that it goes beyond the capacity. So you can see here of the new MB1 line, if it was to be like people use the resource to the total benefit, so if everyone used it right to 0, you actually have a situation where it's gone beyond the capacity. And so what we can see is like C, I put some levels in here, that is actually the capacity. Right, this was QS before, I should have put that now, but B is actually beyond it. So C is the capacity. If we had a QS, sorry, I should have put it there, MB equals 0, that would have been QS. But now where B is, that's like how much benefit people are getting, but at that capacity of C, A would actually be the cost. And this is the idea of like the cost that would now be incurred from too many people using it. What I would be saying is that marginal cost doesn't equal 0 anymore. If you have too many people using a resource, you have to do a lot more maintenance on it, particularly like walking tracks. You have to like keep the tracks in order, like if too many people use it, it wears it down. So you've got like wooden and steps in and stuff like that. You've got to cut back the trees and stuff like that. Toilets, Tongariro crossing, go to the toilet before you start. And like rubbish and stuff, picking that up. And just like the looking after the flora and the fauna and the park itself, you have to do a lot more of this when you've got too many people. So I would argue that once you go beyond capacity, there starts to be a cost incurred. And so we have this idea that this pink area here is now what we call a loss of efficiency, a loss of welfare to society, a deadweight loss. It is a triangle, again, because of the idea that it's now consumed at B, so it's overused, overconsumed. Society would actually prefer that the usage is less than capacity, or definitely at capacity C, and the cost of going beyond capacity at C is A. So we have this idea of lost welfare shaded in pink, and that's a deadweight loss. So therefore, this has failed even further. Government stepped in and provided it, but now too many people are using it, and it's actually having failure again. So we need to think about what we can do to try and eliminate this pink triangle, the deadweight loss. All right, and we'll look at that next week. So for us to do now, okay, go to 13 Economics Moodle, go to topic 9, walking tracks, and there's actually quite a loss here. We've got true cost of tourism from stuff. There is a death on the Stairway of Heaven. I didn't mention it, but like Tongariro crossing with too many people using it, there's a lot more accidents and stuff, and search and rescue, and like Westpac helicopter rescue's got to come in and that. It's going a bit far, but there you go. And then there's several articles on overcrowding. So I want you to make notes. Are they becoming overused? If so, how? what does it mean for the benefit of users, and can you think about the cost of maintenance? All right, so enjoy.